Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today we are unpacking OLG0001, the 10-minute neural threshold, and the 6 Hz medicine. We're diving deep into the clinical breakdown of how a very specific interaural frequency differential, 247 Hz and 253 Hz to be exact, literally forces your brain's superior olivary complex into what's called the frequency following response. We're going to look at exactly how this physical hijack cures broke panic and induces that legendary Focus 15 state. If you've ever felt completely paralyzed by overwhelming stress, you are definitely going to want to pay attention to this one. So here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll diagnose the mechanics of broke panic. Then we'll breeze through the physics of 6 Hz medicine, break down the frequency following response, look at the strict 10-minute neural threshold, and finally, talk about entering the Focus 15 state. Let's jump right in. Phase 1, the broke panic diagnosis, and the epidemic of cognitive fatigue. Look, we really have to start with the visceral, physiological reality that so many modern operators and high-level professionals deal with every single day: extreme cognitive fatigue. It's so important to realize that broke panic is not some psychological weakness. It's not a character flaw. It's actually a highly toxic, entirely measurable biological state. You are stuck in a hyper-beta state, vibrating anywhere between 13 and 30 hertz. In this zone, your amygdala literally hijacks your prefrontal cortex. Your rational logic is completely paralyzed by fear, locking your nervous system in chronic survival mode. And you can see the stark biological contrast right here. On the left, in that hyper-beta state, it's all focused panic, hypervigilance, and executive dysfunction. Standard relaxation techniques, they completely fail here because your brain is simply firing way too fast. So to cure this, we have to deploy a biological override. We literally force the brain out of that high-frequency chaos and push it way down into the restorative theta state, which hums along at a much slower, methodical 4 to 8 Hz. That brings us to Phase 2, Physics of 6 Hz Medicine, the mathematical intervention. This intervention kicks off with what's called a dichotic presentation. Basically, you are delivering a pure 247 Hz sine wave tone into your left ear and a distinctly different 253 Hz tone right into your right ear. Now, this is absolutely crucial. Doing this requires strict stereo headphone isolation. It's just not going to work through your open room speakers. Now, you might be wondering why those exact numbers. Well, the mathematical difference between 253 and 247 is exactly 6. When these two separate tones hit your ears, a region right in your brainstem called the superior olivary complex detects that exact frequency gap. And here's the crazy part. Your brain actually attempts to reconcile the difference and mathematically synthesizes a phantom third beat, a pure 6 Hz signal. That 6 Hz tone doesn't actually exist in the room. Your brain is literally creating it from scratch internally. All right, Phase 3, the frequency following response, hijacking the cortex. So, how exactly does a synthesized phantom beat cure financial panic? It all happens through a mechanism called the frequency following response, or FFR. As your brainstem processes that 6 Hz differential, your entire cortex begins to physically phase lock to that exact slow, steady rhythm. Your brain's electrical pulses literally synchronize with the external acoustic rhythm you're feeding it. It's like a biological metronome. And you can actually feel this working in real time. Practitioners describe it just like this quote says. You'll hear a constant hum vibrating right in the dead center of your skull. Now, that is not your headphones vibrating. That is your nervous system heavily decelerating as your brain physically locks onto the frequency. When you feel it happening, just go with it. Don't fight it. Moving on to Phase 4, the 10-minute neural threshold, or the hospital bed paradigm. Now, this biological override doesn't just happen instantly. There's a strict clinical dosage required to achieve the effect. Based on the Jira-Kitayaka-Korn and Wong-Sawat protocol, we can map this timeline out perfectly. From 0 to 5 minutes, your temporal lobe is basically just processing the audio. Then, from 5 to 10 minutes, the phase locking really kicks in, reducing that panicked beta power. But it is right at that 10-minute mark, exactly 600 seconds of unbroken exposure, that global theta induction is finally achieved. Researchers refer to this as the hospital bed duration. That 10-minute mark is the absolute biological floor. Anything shorter than that just completely fails to saturate the deep layers of your subconscious. If you rip the headphones off after just 5 minutes, your prefrontal cortex's analytical gatekeeper is just going to block the entrainment. You absolutely have to commit to the full 600 seconds. Finally, Phase 5, entering the Focus 15 state, somatic proof and quantum clarity. This is where we see the ultimate transformation. We're moving from the disorganized, chaotic 13 to 30 hertz of broke panic straight down into that beautifully synchronized 6 hertz focus 15 state. In the neuroacoustics world, focus 15 is known as a state of absolute executive clarity. It's often described as a no-time void, where your mind remains razor-sharp and totally free of friction, while your physical body basically goes completely numb. Now, if you want some somatic proof to verify the medicine is actually active and phase locking is happening, operators use something called the unpack. It's a really clever mechanical override. You put on your headphones, stare at a fixed visual point to stop your eyes from darting around, and then force a really deep, sustained yawn. Yawning actually flexes the tensor tympani muscle in your ear, which acoustically isolates your inner ear. When you do that, you will undeniably hear that phantom 6 hertz hum vibrating inside your head. It's incredibly profound somatic proof. And for the advanced practitioners out there who are already holding this deep theta state, the sources describe a physical breathing protocol known as the intrathecal pineal squeeze. By locking your core and pelvic floor and executing a slow, deep inhale, your body acts like a hydraulic pump. It literally pumps cerebral spinal fluid up your spinal column. When that pressurized fluid hits the pineal gland, it creates an electrical spark, triggering a massive gamma brainwave spike. We're talking 25 to 140 hertz. That is what sparks peak superconscious cognitive performance. But listen closely, because all of this incredible biology relies on avoiding one massive technical bottleneck. As the text puts it, standard platform compression destroys delicate phase separation, turning true entrainment into degraded noise. Look, if you're streaming binaural beats on standard video or audio platforms, they are almost certainly being compressed into formats like MP3 or AAC using intensity stereo. That kind of compression saves data by just blending the left and right channels together, but remember, the whole 6 hertz medicine relies entirely on keeping 247 hertz perfectly isolated in one ear and 253 in the other. Blending them totally discards the phase data. The binaural effect is instantly destroyed, and you're literally just listening to useless noise. You absolutely must use uncompressed audio, like WAV or FLAC files, to preserve 100% channel separation. So, to execute this system boot sequence correctly, here is your sovereign execution checklist. 1. Pristine, uncompressed 24/7 and 2053 Hz audio. 2. Strict stereo headphone isolation, no phone speakers allowed. 3. A high-contrast visual focus trap to stabilize your gaze. And 4. A minimum of 10 minutes of unbroken exposure to bypass that prefrontal cortex. The clinical blueprint for accessing the Focus 15 state and overriding extreme cognitive fatigue is now entirely in your hands. You know the exact mathematical and biological mechanics required to physically hack your own autonomic nervous system. So the only question left is, when will you initiate the 6 hertz protocol and finally cure your broke panic? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.